Hi there, this is Soldier Ronin Films, and welcome to an update collection video. I am going to just go through my Powerhouse Indicator collection. I don't have all the Indicator releases. I probably never will, just because some of the films don't really interest me as much. But I thought I would go through them, as I've now watched most of them apart from 3 box sets and an individual release. But I just thought I would make some recommendations, tell you guys what I kind of think of them quickly. Powerhouse Indicator aren't the cheapest releases, but certainly all the ones that I've kind of taken a chance on without knowing much about the film, I have been pleased with. So again, I would just take the recommendations with a grain of salt. Obviously everybody's taste is different. So let's get started. Again, leave comments down below which Indicator releases you would recommend, which ones you have, and maybe even which ones you're a little disappointed with. So we'll start with number 1, which is always a very good place to start, and this is John Carpenter's Christine. Not the best John Carpenter film, but it's a really nice print and there's some really nice extras on it. Then we have number 2, Body Double by Brian De Palma. Again, perhaps not his best film, but I think it is one of the good early ones. Again, it's another voyeuristic Brian De Palma film with people watching people, which runs through quite a lot of his films. Then we jump to number 5, which is 10 Rillington Place by Richard Fleischer with David Attenborough. Richard Attenborough even. 10 Rillington Place with David Attenborough is a completely different film. They should actually have a commentary track with David Attenborough studying the behaviours of Richard Attenborough. This is really good and I would highly recommend picking this one up. It has a kind of grimy documentary kind of feel to it, and Richard Attenborough does give a really creepy performance, and there's some great extras on it. Richard Attenborough himself said he felt dirty every time he would go home after filming. Number 7 is The Lady from Shanghai with Orson Welles, which I would highly recommend picking up if you're into Orson Welles at all or film history at all. Again, this has got a good bunch of extras. It's well worth picking up. It's The Lady from Shanghai. Have number 12, which is The Anderson Tapes. It's one of Sidney Lumet's best, with Sean Connery in a very early performance by Christopher Walken. And I would recommend this. The extras on this aren't amazing, but it's worth it really just for the film, because the film's one of the best heist films of all time. Number 13, The New Centurions, again by Richard Fleischer. I would highly recommend this one. This one just blew me away when I saw it. I can't believe I'd never actually seen it before. It's kind of like Hill Street Blues before Hill Street Blues, as far as a police procedural, and you just kind of follow them through their adventures. So there's no kind of one linear story about a big master villain or anything. It's just literally gritty real life cops shot on location in Los Angeles. Brilliant performances with George C. Scott and Stacey Keach, and it was written by a homicide detective. So I would highly recommend that one because it's awesome. Number 14 is another George C. Scott, and it's Hardcore by Paul Schrader. I would recommend this one. You're probably not going to watch it very often, but again, it does have a great George C. Scott performance. Again, it's weird because I'm not really a huge fan of George C. Scott, even though I now do have a lot of his films. Very strange. Number 15 is the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which I've done a random review of. It's a fantastic, forgotten little Technicolor, dreamlike Dr. Seuss musical fantasy, and it's quite fantastic. I would recommend that one. Number 16 is Fritz Lang's The Big Heat. Needless to say, I would recommend picking this one up if you can, because it's fantastic. You get Tony Raines on Fritz Lang The Big Heat, you get Martin Scorsese in The Big Heat, you get Michael Mann on The Big Heat, an isolated score, fantastic booklet. Yeah, well worth picking up. Number 22 is Fragment of Fear. This is by Richard Safarian, who will always have a warm place in my heart for Vanishing Point. This is a kind of, well, it's 1970, which is the same year as The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. It's almost like a British proto-giallo. It doesn't quite work. Even at 96 minutes, it's maybe 15 minutes too long. It's an interesting watch, but it's one that I wouldn't necessarily be rushing back to watch very often. But certainly for Richard Safarian fans, it's worth picking up, but not one I would immediately go out and rush to buy, I don't think. But again, let me know if it's your favourite film in the collection. This is number 23. This is Torture Garden. This is one of the Amicus portmanteau films. Again, this isn't the best one. I mean, obviously the best one's Dead of Night, 1945. But this one it's a 93-minute version and a 100-minute version. There is a 77-minute interview with Freddie Francis, and some other nice. There's Kim Newman on Torture Garden for 25 minutes. Again, it's a fun little film. I would recommend it if you like that kind of thing. All the Dr. Terror's House of Horror and stuff. So the next set is the Sinbad set, which sadly I had to pay a little bit extra for because it's now out of print. And this is number 24, 25 and 26, because it is the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, and Sinbad in the Eye of the Tiger. I mean, if you haven't got it already, I would certainly recommend trying to get it. Apart from anything else, it just reminds you of your childhood if you're of a certain age, and watching Saturday afternoon films. The Sinbad films I mean, obviously they're not masterpieces or anything, but there's just something, there's a charm about them, and they are just wonderful. So I'm so glad I got it, even though I maybe paid a little bit extra. It's well worth it. What else are you going to do with your money? So this is number 27. This is The Front, which is a wonderful little film about McCarthyism, and it's got a fantastic performance by Zero Mostel, who we're used to just being a clown, but in this he actually gives a fairly heartbreaking performance as one of the guys blacklisted, and obviously they're trying to get him to name names about who's a communist and such. Again, maybe not the greatest film in the world, but certainly worth having just for Zero Mostel's performance, to be honest. Number 29 is Housekeeping, Bill Forsyth. I mean, while we're here, can Indicator please do Local Hero on Blu-ray, please? This is a really interesting film. It's really downbeat and complex, and it's a really interesting film, and I would recommend it. I mean, I'm not sure how many times I'm going to dip in and rewatch it, but it's certainly worth having. And again, this has an interview with Bill Forsyth, and him talking about housekeeping and other things. This is number 31. This is Castle Keep. This is one of those films, it's from 1969. Sidney Pollack directed it. It's one of those war films where it's set in World War II, but it's really about Vietnam. So it's soldiers off the beaten path in a castle. This and the 9th configuration would probably be a nice double bill. Again, it's probably a little bit over long, but it does have very nice moments. It has Scott Wilson falling in love with a Volkswagen Beetle. It has Peter Falk giving up the war to become a baker again in a small town. It's not the greatest, but it certainly has flashes of brilliance in it. So that's Castle Keep, and that's number 31. Number 33 is The Stone Killer, Charles Bronson, which is a fun little Charles Bronson against corrupt cops. There's not much to it. It's Charles Bronson killing corrupt cops, but it's kind of fun in a Charles Bronson killing corrupt cops way. Number 37, Gumshoe, which is a great wee Stephen Frears film. I did a double take video with this and Pulp by Mike Hodges with Michael Caine. I would recommend Gumshoe with the recently passed Albert Finney. Gumshoe and Miller's Crossing, that's two great Albert Finney performances. So this is number 41, 42 and 43, and this is volume 1 of Ray Harryhausen. So we have It Came Beneath the Sea, 20 million miles to Earth, and The Three Worlds of Gulliver. And again, these might not be masterpieces, but there's just a wonderful charm to them. And the effects, even though obviously old, there's still more life in them than CG effects, because there is actually something there. There's a ton of extras. Probably won't be able to read them for the glare, but I mean, there's just tons of extras, and they are highly recommended. they're certainly still in print. Number 48 is one of the highlights of recent years of the releases. It's Night of the Demon. This is the special edition with the book, and this is 4 different versions. And the one thing I do regret about this is I got this from Amazon and not Indicator, where I now get my titles straight from Indicator, because you get them usually like 10 days early, and if you pre-order a certain number of the releases you get a discount. But I didn't get this from Indicator, and of course you got a little business card from Julian Carswell, which would have been nice. This has a ton of extras. This is just, I think this might be out of print, but you can just get it on the one disc release. But this is an essential. This is a wonderful Jacques Tourneur film from 1957. So the next one is number 51, 52 and 53. This is The Wonderful Worlds of Ray Harryhausen Volume 2. And this contains Mysterious Island, First Men in the Moon, and of course Jason and the Argonauts. And again, if you're of a certain age, Jason and the Argonauts will hold a special place, just again for seeing a world that you didn't think was possible. And again, I would much rather watch these than CG fests. So that's number 51, 52 and 53. That's Ray Harryhausen Volume 2. Highly recommended. So this is one of the box sets I've still to watch, because my backlog is it's going down slightly. This is number 62, 63, 64, 65 and 66. This is 5 Tall Tales, Bud Boddicker and Randolph Scott Westerns at Columbia. So this has The Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Again, Ride Lonesome and Comanche Station. So please let me know in the comments below if you have this set and you've watched them and which ones you would recommend. But I've still to dig into these 5. I wasn't going to get these, and then I thought they're westerns. I love westerns, and at the price I got it, it was a no-brainer really. Number 67. One of my favourites, Charlie Varick. If you've never seen Charlie Varick, just buy it. It's fantastic. Walter Matthau, Andy Robinson, Joe Don Baker. It's absolutely wonderful, by Don Siegel, about a bank robber. It's fantastic. This is one of the ones I recommend most highly. That's number 67, Charlie Varick. Apologies for the focus. I need to get a better focus puller. Number 68 is arguably the film that I would recommend the most from Indicator, if you're going to buy one Indicator release. To me, this is probably the film for it. It's number 68, Blue Collar. It's one of the most important films of the 70s. One of the most important films made about working for a living. One of the best debuts of all time. Paul Schrader wrote and directed it. It's got 3 fantastic performances by Richard Pryor, Harvey Keitel and Yaphet Kotto. It's got a great score. And it's such a brilliant film that for some reason it's kind of been forgotten about. Certainly in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, nobody really talked about it, but I would say there's not too many films. I mean, for me, the 70s was the golden era of Hollywood and American films. And I can't really think of too many films that are better than Blue Collar or more important than Blue Collar. Again, the tagline at the back: the company builds cars and destroys men. Number 68, Blue Collar. Please go and buy it. Number 70 is The Collector, which is a strange film for William Wyler, you might say. This is fantastic. Terence Stamp and Samantha Eggar. It's one of those great double-header performances, and I would certainly recommend this. You won't dare open your mouth, but you'll be screaming for her to escape. Apparently. Number 72, The St. Valentine's Day Massacre by Roger Corman. This is a fun little film. This was probably Roger Corman's biggest budget to date at the time. This was 1967. I think he said he had like 5 or 6 weeks to shoot, which for him was like an eternity. It stars Jason Robards as Al Capone, and it's kind of presented in a kind of documentary fashion. There's a voiceover about the characters that we see, and it really is a nice little film, which I hadn't seen before, bizarrely. Number 72 is St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I would recommend picking that up, especially for you Roger Corman fans. Number 73, Little Murders. This is Alan Arkin's only directing film, or maybe did one more. He might have done Fire Sale, I'm not sure whether he directed it. This stars Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland. It's a strange little film. I would recommend getting it because it's just so odd. To me, it's a little bit like Buffet Foire with Gerard Depardieu. It's kind of surreal and blackly comic and off the wall. Sometimes it's a little bit too zany for its own good. Alan Arkin, who I love in pretty much everything, he turns up as a detective and he's actually a little bit too much. So it might not be a kind of great polished work, but there's such energy and inventiveness in it. I mean, you might love it, you might hate it. It's kind of one of those films, but it's certainly worth investing in because it's a fascinating little film. That's Little Murders, and that's number 73. Number 84 is The Odessa File, which is a nice Nazi conspiracy based on Frederick Forsyth book. With John Voight, and he doesn't play a Venezuelan in this or a Colombian, which is always good. He has a relatively normal accent in it. Number 85 is The China Syndrome. Remember when Hollywood made films that were intelligent and about stuff and were well written and well acted and well directed? China Syndrome. It's another brilliant performance by Jack Lemmon. Michael Douglas and Jane Fonda are fantastic in it as well. This was actually when Michael Douglas was known as more of a producer than an actual actor. But Jack Lemmon is just fantastic in it. I would highly recommend picking this one up as well if you haven't already. This is number 85, The China Syndrome. Number 87, one of my favourite underrated films of all time, Gardens of Stone by Francis Ford Coppola from 1987. This is one of the films that he had to do to pay off his debts. but this one's the best of those films. It's about Arlington Cemetery with James Caan and James Earl Jones, and it's absolutely fantastic. Number 87, and I'd highly recommend it. So the next two box sets are two other box sets I haven't watched yet, so I'll let you make the recommendations for me. This is number 94, 95, 96 and 97. This is William Castle Volume 1, and this has The Tingler with Vincent Price, one of the reasons I got it, 13 Ghosts, Homicidal and Mr. Sardonicus, and as always there is a bunch of extras. So that's 94, 95, 96, 97. And the other box set I haven't watched yet is William Castle Volume 2. And this has Zots, 13 Frightened Girls, The Old Dark House and Straight Jacket with Joan Crawford. So this is 98, 99, 100, 101. And again there's a warning on the back. Vividly depicts axe murders. And you can see that woman's reaction to axe murders. Number 102 is Fritz Lang's Ministry of Fear. It is so fantastic that all these Fritz Lang films are getting releases in Blu-ray. This is one of my personal favourites just because I love Ray Milland, because he's always looking shifty. I mean, it might not be the greatest plot in the world, but it's really well done. There's a wonderful seance scene, and if you're into Fritz Lang, it's a no-brainer. You probably have it already, but I would highly recommend this indicator release. Number 106 is Missing. Again, this is a must-buy. Jack Lemmon gives another wonderful performance. Sissy Spacek's fantastic. And again, it's another Deutsche Costa Gravis. It's another great American film of the late 70s, early 80s. I just wish Indicator, I mean, I know it's usually Columbia products, but they've got Missing, they've got the China Syndrome, so they've really got to release Save the Tiger as well for those three great Jack Lemmon performances. But this is Missing. It's still powerful today, and Jack Lemmon is just fantastic, so I would urge you to buy it immediately. 106, Missing. This is 111, one of their latest releases. This is A Dandy in Aspic, which is a fairly bizarre title. This is Anthony Mann's last film. He actually died kind of halfway through it. It's a spy, it's a Cold War spy thriller, which is a little bit disjointed. Again, probably to do with the fact that Anthony Mann died halfway through it. It's kind of strange. I mean, Peter Cook turns up and makes jokes and is actually very funny in it, but it's completely out of place. I would say it's kind of an interesting oddity, but again, it's probably not one of the releases that I would watch that many times. A Dandy in Aspic. That's a bizarre title. It's number 111. This is 112. 112, Michael Powell's Age of Consent. Now, as you may know, I'm a huge Powell and Pressburger fan. I would recommend buying this release. The film itself isn't his best work, obviously, but it's interesting. There's two cuts. There's a 107 minute cut and a 100 minute cut, but this release is really for the extras. I mean, the film is a good film, but I wouldn't necessarily, if I'm going to pick out a Michael Powell film, I'm not going to really go for Age of Consent. It's Helen Mirren's first performance, but the extras on this release are ridiculous. There's 2 cuts of the film, 107 minutes, 100 minutes. There's a commentary. There's a John Player lecture with Michael Powell, which is 85 minutes. There's a Guardian interview with Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, which is 105 minutes. There's an appraisal by Ian Christie, who wrote Arrows of Desire, which is a really fantastic book about the Archers. So that's 38 minutes. There's a making of featuring the production manager, the composer and the editor. There's Martin Scorsese on Age of Consent. Helen Mirren talks about Age of Consent in her first role, which is a really nice interview. Down Under with Ron and Valerie Taylor, because they shot the underwater photography, which at the time hadn't really been seen with the Great Barrier Reef, kind of in cinemas. And obviously 6 years later they would do the shark footage for Jaws. There's The Boy Who Turned Yellow from 1972, which is Powell and Pressburger's last collaboration, which is 54 minutes, which was made for the Children's Foundation, which is a fun little science fiction / educational short about electricity, which is a curiosity but strangely enjoyable. There's an image gallery. There's a 40-page booklet. So it's one of those releases that just for those 2 interviews with Powell and then Powell and Pressburger, it's a no-brainer to pick up. Age of Consent 112. So 113 is Berserk, talking about odd little films. This is from 1967, starring Joan Crawford, who was just past the Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and she would probably be 60, 61, so she was starting her kind of late run of horror films. Obviously she's in Straight Jacket in one of the William Castle box sets. But this, she's in charge of a circus where bad things start happening. Again, not the greatest film in the world, but it has a kind of fascinating allure all the same. Because again, it's got a nice bit at the back. How much can you stand before you go berserk? Yeah, there's a wonderful musical number that just appears in the middle of the film or near the end of the film. It's quite... yeah, it's one of those films that you should watch late at night. So I would recommend getting it, but you might hate it, but it's just one of those bizarre little midnight movies. So that's Berserk 113. This is 114, Psych 59 from 1964. This is one of those 60s films about sexual relationships, and as it says in the back, the man in her room was her husband, the woman in the room was her sister, apparently. It does have a fantastic performance by Samantha Eggar. Again, it's probably one of those films in the collection that I wouldn't necessarily watch that often, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it immediately if you're going to buy 4 or 5 indicators just to see what they're like. It's beautifully shot, it's really well acted, but it did leave me a little cold. That's Psych 59, that's 114. 118 is Oleana, which is one of David Mamet's finest works. I think I did a random review of this a long time ago, and I would urge everybody to buy it. Again, it's one of those two-handers. There's only two actors, William H. Macy and Deborah Eisenstadt, who was actually the stand-in when it was on, it made its Broadway run. This is fantastic. It's about sexual politics, and depending on your view, you will side with one character or another, and then halfway through the film you'll probably flip sides and then flip sides again. It just proves you can make a riveting film with like two people in it and just all talk. It's fantastic. That's 118 Oleana. I was so happy when I saw that was getting a release. Number 127, The Third Secret, from 1964. Again, this is a bizarre little psycho thriller about the murder of a psychiatrist and which one of his 4 or 5 patients might have actually killed him. Again, in the back, the story of a man searching for a killer who might even be himself. This is directed by Charles Crichton, who made a lot of British films. Like Stephen Boyd, Jack Hawkins even, Richard Attenborough, and Judi Dench makes her first appearance, even though it's a kind of blink and you'll miss it. Again, it's an interesting film. It's quite dark. It's beautifully shot. Again, it's in that group of maybe films that I wouldn't necessarily revisit that often, but I'm kind of glad to have it because it is a nice little film. This is The Third Secret, 127. But again, please let me know what you think of these releases. 141, The Wrong Box. This is by Brian Forbes, and this is just a knockabout romp about coffins and fortunes, and as you can see, it's got a fairly all-star cast with John Mills, Ralph Richardson, Michael Caine, Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, Nanette Newman, Tony Hancock and Peter Sellers. It's maybe a little overlong, but it is an absolute joy. You can just stick it on and just forget about your worries. Yeah, some good extras and a nice little film. And finally, quite aptly, number 144, The Last Movie, Dennis Hopper, which I still haven't watched. Yeah, again, Nazarene Productions did a review of it. I'll leave a link in the description. Again, it might not be a film that you like, but certainly this has a bunch of really good extras, and I just thought it's going to go out of print, so I thought I would just pick it up and I shall watch it at some point. But again, like all the films, let me know which ones you would recommend yourself, which indicators that I don't have, that I should have. I thank you for staying to the end of this video. You will get an award for endurance one day. And thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again. This is Solitude Rowan saying farewell.